Heng is a character with a rich hidden past that we slowly delve into more and more as we get through the Xianzhou luofu quest, as well as more about the Vidyadhara and Xianzhou's history. We first meet him as one of the trailblazers on the Astral Express, a man that does not say much, sleeps in the archives and helps maintain them, and is said to be attractive by the other members of Herta's space station. The Xianzhou luofu quest starts with Heng receiving nightmares, possibly from Blade. This comes from the relic set Passerby of Wandering Cloud, which matches Blade's aesthetic, particularly the bracer, which is created by a Vidyadhara and talks about how it generates a telepathic connection with both wearers. Through the Xianzhou luofu quest and the in-game text, we begin to unfold his past, that he is exiled from the Xianzhou luofu, and that he has a complicated past with the other characters in this region. Through the mirage echoes at the Scale Gorge waterscape, we learn about the previous incarnations of the High Elder of the Vidyadhara. After the Vidyadhara joined the Xianzhou Alliance, the entire delve of Scale Gorge waterscape, including the lunar-rescent depths, was brought over from their home world to the luofu. Sometime after Yubi, the Imbibitor Lunae at the time, and the earliest incarnation of the Imbibitor Lunae that we know of, made the decision to move the Scale Gorge waterscape underwater to help the luofu seal the ambrosial arbor. The Xianzhou natives felt they owed the Vidyadhara a great debt for this, while some Vidyadhara, including the Imbibitor Lunae himself, saw it as repayment for giving them a home on the luofu. We now know that Heng, in his previous incarnation, Yinfeng, was High Elder of the Vidyadhara, the Imbibitor Lunae. He joined the High Cloud Quintet alongside Jingyuan, Blade, known as Yingxing at the time, jingliu, and baiheng. Together they accomplished many feats, and he became one of the most prolific Vidyadhara of his time. However, sometime later, Yinfeng was exiled for some sort of crime or crimes. At this point in time, we don't know exactly what this crime is. However, we know that Yinfeng was stated to have been thieving immortality, and we'll get into the theories of what these crimes may be later on in the video. But whatever these crimes were, it was considered an act of rebellion against the Xianzhou, and the event would be known as the Sedition of Imbibitor Lunae. After these crimes, the Vidyadhara were divided on the matter. There were those who sided with Yinfeng and those who sided with the Xianzhou. There were even some Vidyadhara using the event to push their own political motives. It was a controversial time. Yinfeng was captured and he was held in the shackling prison and forced to undergo a hatching rebirth, the theories of which we'll also get into, and then was exiled from the luofu. He then joined the Astral Express and became the man we know him to be. There are a couple of theories on what crimes Yinfeng may have committed. We're gonna first be going through the Beloved theory, which I did go over in my previous video, so if you've watched that, I'll put timestamps below of any new content I've gone through. The second theory is the Dragon Heart theory and an associated theory with baiheng. So let's start with the Beloved theory. The Beloved is someone whom we know Yinfeng killed and turned into a monstrosity, not necessarily in that order. There are two main theories of who the Beloved might be referring to. The first is that the Beloved is Blade himself, who does seem to cover all the boxes. He may have died by Yinfeng's hand and became what could be considered a monstrosity through his immortality. Yinfeng's crime of thieving immortality may have something to do with Blade's immortality. From the water mirage of Yinfeng and Yingxing, we can see that Yinfeng snuck Yingxing into the Scale Gorge waterscape, and he may have done this in order to research immortality. Yingxing may be who Blade was before his immortality, as we know there was a member of the High Cloud Quintet who was a short-lived species and a weapons forger, and Blade's character story also mentions once being a weapons forger. The in-game text describes the Drought of Draconic Surge, a possible way to achieve immortality in which the main ingredient is a live bone marrow sample from the Vidyadhara species. The Vidyadhara species are the only species in which their immortality is healthy and not affected by Mara. Even the long-life species of most of the Xianzhou luofu will be stricken by Mara at some point in their later life. Blade's character story part 2 describes how Blade dies and comes back to life, waking to a black-haired individual missing his horns. Yinfeng is meant to be guarding the ambrosial arbor, and so he has access to it, and using it to bring Blade back to life goes against the Xianzhou luofu's rules due to the way immortality has negatively affected their people. This makes Blade's death and immortality one of the crimes that Yinfeng may have committed. Blade also mentions the Beloved in his character stories, which could suggest that it's not him. However, Kafka mentions that Blade doesn't remember a lot of what happened, and so he could have just forgotten that it was him. The second theory of who the Beloved may be is that it may have been baiheng. In this case, Yingxing and Yinfeng may have worked together to bring her back to life. There's also another water mirage at the Scale Gorge waterscape of a woman asking to see how she is faring. This could be Jingliu looking for baiheng. Either way, Danshu mentions that she was tasked by the Seat of Divine Foresight themselves to find a cure for the Drought of Draconic Surge. This means that Jingyuan could have been the person that asked for this, further suggesting the High Cloud Quintet's involvement in the immortality substance. The third theory is that the Beloved could be someone that ticks all of these boxes of having been killed by Danfeng and turned into a monstrosity, however, is a character that we haven't really come across yet, the Dragon Heart theory. From the in-game text and the water mirages, we can maybe start to outline the timeline of the battle. But in order to get into the Dragon Heart theory, we also have to get into the theory that bailu is baiheng reincarnated, or maybe even cloned in some way, and how Danfeng might be related to this. This comes from the similarities in their names, like how Danheng was once Danfeng, bailu could have once been baiheng. Bailu's character story states that high elders will receive the Orb of Abysm and the Transmutation Arcanum, and they will then receive dreams of the previous high elders. However, bailu didn't receive these dreams, resulting in her attendants believing that it is apparent that either her dragon heart is in some way damaged or the Transmutation Arcanum has not been carried through in full. We see in the quest that Jingyuan does seem to suggest that Danfeng is responsible for why the dragon transmutation has not been passed on intact. The game also mentions that other Vidyadhara have not been able to rebirth because of Danfeng's actions. From this, we can presume that Danfeng was likely the last character with the dragon heart and the Transmutation Arcanum. From Bailu's character story, we know that she seems to hold a faulty dragon heart, which raises the question if 1. Whether something happened to it, and 2. Whether it is the true genuine dragon heart, and if not, where did it go? So the dragon heart theory mirrors the beloved theory where there are 3 people that could hold it right now. Blade, baiheng, third party that we haven't heard of, or maybe it's not with anybody. It could also somehow be involved in Danfeng's crime of thieving immortality. This time we'll start the dragon heart theory with the idea that baiheng or bailu has the dragon heart. We know that Danfeng brought Yingxing into the Scale Gorge waterscape and told him he had 2 hours, maybe to do research regarding immortality or something similar to this process. We do also see this idea of cloning with Tazaronth, a dead aeon that was said to be infinitely propagating. Tazaronth is said by Kafka to have appeared after the disappearance of Long the Permanence, dividing the aeon's path. Moreover, when Bailu visits the Express, she says she dreams of flying and traveling, and Baiheng, as we know, was a Starskiff pilot. Baiheng's partial cloning or reincarnation using the dragon heart could explain how she turned into a Vidyadhara, as well as why her own dragon heart seems to be damaged, and or why her Transmutation Arcanum has not been carried through in full. We also know that when short-life species are given a Vidyadhara bone marrow, they suffer a regression, maybe explaining Bailu's stature. There are in-game books on the pursuit of immortality and genetic manipulation, especially with research into the Vidyadhara. The Vidyadhara were even once said to be able to change the form of any creature like clay. However, we don't know whether this process of turning a Foxian girl into a Vidyadhara has been done before. There is also mentions of a mysterious miracle of the bloom-born Scion, in which Bailu could have been this miracle that occurred, though we don't know for sure if she's related to it. Something wrong may have happened during this process, which may be why there is a Vidyadhara egg of a blindfolded woman with ice swords, who sounds a lot like Jingliu, killing a strange furred dragon. If this strange furred dragon is baiheng, then this could explain why Blade described the beloved turning into a monstrosity. Foxians are said to be susceptible to becoming Mara-struck, and even have the ability to shapeshift. This could explain why Jingliu apologizes for killing the furred dragon, and was so harsh towards Blade, because she had to watch Baiheng turn into a monstrosity and kill her. So to summarize the Baiheng dragon heart theory, Danfeng could have used the original dragon heart or part of it with Baiheng's remains, creating some sort of alchemy that gives her a new body during her time inside the Vidyadhara egg, before she becomes Bailu. And this is how she becomes the reincarnation or clone that we now see as Bailu. Once this occurred, Danfeng could have asked Shuhu to make Yingxing immortal, maybe making some sort of deal, therefore explaining Blade's talent, Shuhu's gift. This may be what Blade means when he talks about the debt or cost that he and Danheng share. However, we don't know the process of turning Baiheng into Bailu, if it's possible, or whether it definitely requires the dragon heart. Therefore, the Baiheng is now Bailu theory is still possible even in the second dragon heart theory. The second dragon heart theory is that Blade is the one who was given the dragon heart, which may be how he was able to achieve that almost perfect immortality, and may also be why chest bandages are part of his design. There are also in-game texts that discuss research into the resurrection of short-life species and transforming them into long-life species. Blade becoming immortalized after being badly hurt and injured in a fight may explain why he talks about no longer being able to create weapons the way that he used to, as as his immortality was given to him after his injuries, he isn't able to heal them with his newfound immortality.
For
This is
long-lived
similar to
species,
Xianzhou, who was born blind and unable to recover her sight despite technological advancements and becoming immortal. Moreover, this would mean that he may have been at Baiheng's death, which could also explain why Jingliu treated him so harshly, as Jingliu may partially blame Blade for being part of Baiheng's death. Blade's immortality is particularly special because all Xianzhou natives actually do become Mara-struck in their later years. However, they can be killed off, whereas Blade can't. Jingliu, arguably one of the strongest characters in the Xianzhou, has tried to kill him off again and again to no effect. This dragon heart could be what's so special about his condition. Blade also seems to have become a younger version of himself upon becoming immortal, which could also be because of the dragon heart. Vidyadhara cells are implied in the in-game text to be able to alter genetics, and even soaking in the Vidyadhara pools can make one feel younger. The dragon heart being with Blade or elsewhere could explain why Bailu's attendants believe that Bailu's heart is damaged, because it isn't within her at all. But if Baiheng is not the third dragon, then it could instead be Danfeng releasing his full power in the moment and thus turning into a dragon, which Jingliu had to injure as he got out of hand. This could explain why the attendants of the High Elder have Bailu's tail locked by the dragon horn pillory in order to refrain from the sedition of Imbibitor Lunae to ever happen again. From the way Jingren spoke to Blade at the Scale Gorge waterscape, we can see that Jingren might have tasked Blade with voicing the Imbibitor Lunae form out of Danheng.
My task is complete.
That it is. Thank you for assisting the Xianzhou in this small matter.
Is it just a happy coincidence for them both that Blade wanted to hurt Danheng and Jingren thought he might hurt Danheng fatally enough to bring this form out of him? Or did it have to be Blade for some reason, maybe because he holds the dragon heart? However, with this theory of Blade holding the dragon heart, that would mean that we don't know exactly why Blade's talent is called Shuhu's gift, or what that gift could have been. Perhaps the immortality he receives could be a combination of Shuhu's abilities and the dragon heart. The third theory is that Danfeng might have traded the dragon heart away in exchange for Shuhu, ensuring Baiheng and Blade's survival. These two theories, the beloved theory and the dragon heart theory, are not mutually exclusive. Both of these events could have happened. From these theories, we can start to see that the High Cloud Quintet may be who Blade is speaking about in his prophecy, of which the three people that pay a price may be those that have been affected by immortality. With the theories of Danfeng's crimes covered, we're now going to get into the theories of his rebirth. Danheng sees himself as a reincarnation, as Vidyadhara rebirths are meant to create a completely new person that is devoid of any past memory. But there are a couple of in-game texts that might suggest otherwise. Danheng might have gone through a molting rebirth, hinted through various in-game texts, such as in the A Night Stranger quest and Blade seeing a less mature of Danfeng at his resurrection. This has been described as not a proper rebirth. Jingren also mentions an exuviation charm that was placed on Danheng against his will, and how the charm contained a flaw. This could make Danheng an unreliable narrator. What might have happened is that when he came out of the Vidyadhara egg, he might not know what he had gone through was the molting process, and thought he was reborn as per the usual process. Ultimately, I'm excited to learn more about Danheng's character and watch him grow. Danheng sees himself as just that, Danheng. However, he dreams of the past, of the previous Imbibitor Lunaes and all the decisions that Danfeng made that ultimately makes him the Danheng that he is now. Moreover, the past haunts him and isn't something that he can completely run away from. It's understandable that he doesn't want to be associated with the past, especially with the negativity and controversy it brings from both the Xianzhou and the Vidyadhara. However, facing the past may be necessary for his character growth, and we as players may get to watch him grow with this part of his identity. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please let me know what you think of the theories in the comments. Please consider subscribing if you enjoy my content. Of course, no pressure. It takes 1,000 subscribers to become monetized on YouTube, and I would be really grateful to be able to reach that point. Hopefully, may we meet again in the next lore video.